I'm going to start the meeting. I'll kick the meeting off at 11:02. And excuse me, kick the meeting off at 11:02. We have, I think, introductions. I don't really have anything. Do we have anything, Princess? I don't think there was anything.
No.
All right. So topics for discussion. I'm going to do the big thing today. I'm going to do a PowerPoint presentation for everyone. I mentioned we did a survey recently of DDS case managers and resource managers and clinical staff about some issues that we may or may not be having with DDS communications. And I had our survey data analyst, awesome, great person, Julia, take a look and analyze our data, and she put together a great presentation that I plan on sharing with you guys today. So if you just give me a second, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to try to do this, see if I can actually do this. Sorry. Hoping everyone can see the PowerPoint. Yes?
Yes.
Just want to see. I have my note slide. All right, perfect. Okay, so this is the DDS Communications Feedback Survey. The findings report is created by Julia Walsh in our Business Intelligence Unit, I believe it's called. So just an overview. Obviously, we already know the survey was, I mentioned this a little before, the survey was completed. Sorry, today we're going to talk about the survey, why the survey was completed, who participated, what were the findings, and our next steps. And as you can see, the survey was created, we talked about this already, the survey was created for finding out more information, how we can better get more information, more timely information, more accurate information directly to our case managers, resource managers, nursing and clinical staff. Those are some of the staff that we identified, Princess and myself identified as being the one staff that interact mostly with our families and individuals, right? The people that ultimately we're trying to get more information on these ARPA incentives too. So we had a great response. 153 staff were able to participate. 146 staff were in positions we wanted to hear back from the most. And those people we left out were unfortunately or fortunately the likes of Wayne and some other case management and supervisor staff people. We were looking more for the direct people. So there are a couple supervisors that responded to the survey and we left them out. I'm just singling out Wayne because Wayne's on the committee. Based on core is, I don't know what core stands for, but basically it's the database that in the state of Connecticut uses for HR. So each department position type gets a number, and they're assigned to the numbers assigned to the whatever the type of position is, and that, anyways, it's a core number, and we're able to see the distributions of the position of the respondents. Please note IFS. Prince, what's IFS again?
Individual Family Services.
Yeah, individual family services includes helpline case managers. This is due to the coding in core. And as you can see, there's just an overall great response from the group. I should mention that I'll take questions on this at the end. When we looked at the data about resources, we saw some variations by how respondents identified with their role. Why this was not all generally nurses reporting having cell phones or having access to one, while case managers and resource managers did not report access to cell phones. Most respondents, especially nursing, case managers and resource managers, indicate having computers and state emails, which I think we all, or at least on the internal side, kind of all knew that already. Telework has been expanded in the last few years. For response to the survey, 26 reported working in the office all the time, 6 reported teleworking all the time, and the remaining are hybrid, with most of the time as telework. And most people reported, and as I mentioned earlier on, the total respondents is 143, or sorry, 153 in this chart. Most people reported a variety of methods for getting information. As you can see, supervisor emails was most common, with the commissioner's Friday email, and in CO, central office emails in general close behind. For those people who are not part of the DDS world, the commissioner sends out Friday messages, which I'll a weekly Friday message to update DDS staff, which I'll mention later on in our presentation. While people have ways of getting communication, there seems to be issues with timeliness. Only 56% of respondents indicated their information was timely, while 28% indicated they felt neutral, and 13% indicated it was untimely. In follow-up comments, 30 of the 53 comments indicated communication was not happening or was not prompt. Common examples are supervisor missing staff when emailing, or external people to DDS, like providers or individuals, knowing about changes prior to DDS staff. Other comments indicated holding information until a meeting would contribute to examples of external people knowing about changes before DDS staff. And the final findings surrounded staffing. As we all know, DDS has a mass retirements leaving. DDS has had mass retirements, leaving gaps across the agency. Some are empty or being filled as TWRs, temporary worker retirees. Those are people who previously worked at DDS, retired, and are now back as a part-time worker. This contributes to the length of time to get the information or missing or entire subsets of staff. So one of the issues for people that aren't part of the state world is that TWRs, the temporary worker retirees, don't necessarily work the full 40-hour work weeks because they're limited on amount of hours. So they might be in 3 days a week, and those 2 days that they're not in, there might be some lag or latency on information getting out. When asked about consistency across staff, we found only 47% of respondents were satisfied, 32% neutral, and 21% unsatisfied. In the follow-up comments, over half the comments were about slow or no information provided. They were similar stories as expressed before, where providers or families knew about information DDS staff did not. Some comments were about variation. This could be in specifics of how a new initiative was interpreted, regional difference in processes, or how supervisors impacted the delivery of information. Specifically, comments about supervisors had 2 main themes. Comments indicated some respondents felt their supervisor provided detailed information that offered the opportunity to ask questions and ensured an answer. Other comments indicated one or more of these steps were lacking or being impacted by just limited supervision. And just a little clip of a story I pulled from one of the people who responded. This person said, "I'm not sure I've ever received a notice that an agency was on enhanced monitoring, for example. I can't think of any times management has sent important information like that, with the exception of COVID protocols, which I believe were often sent after we already received guidance from our supervisors. This information was delayed, cumbersome, and often needed follow-up meetings with supervisors to discuss what was actually being stated for providers so DDS staff could follow through. Many times providers mention communications that case managers aren't aware of because communications don't go to them and not to us." So just an example of how sometimes providers finding out stuff a little before just internal DDS staff. So what's working? What's working mostly fits into three categories. Email communication was identified as very important and helpful. This would indicate staff with out-of-state email or access to emails regularly are at a disadvantage, which for the staff purposes that we're kind of looking at in this committee, all of the staff that we are looking for have email addresses. Commissioner's Friday email was mentioned as an opportunity for staff to feel connected to DDS as a whole. Here's one of the comments. "I really enjoyed Jordan, Commissioner Chef's Friday email. I like being in the know, and I like that he directly sends out correspondence to all of us. I feel that as a case manager, I'm valued by the administration." And Commissioner Chef said, I started writing Friday emails at the beginning of the pandemic," said Commissioner Chef. "The emails were initially a way for me to directly thank all staff for the work they have done and continue to do for the individuals we serve. Now the Friday emails provide me with, albeit fun, an opportunity to share important information and updates with the staff and let people know that we're all in this together." As mentioned in the last slide, there were many times direct supervisors were identified as what's working. Supervisors identified in these comments supported their staff to the best of their ability. Again, the comments surrounded providing the information, allowing questions, and them getting answers. And what's not working was across the board. Some people felt there were too many emails, or sorting to find old emails was a challenge. Comments indicated the email searches could also bring up outdated information. So think version, we're on version 4.0, but they're finding version 1.0 in their Outlook inbox search quicker. Luckily, the respondents to the survey had great feedback. Some offered suggestions to help improve issues. One suggestion was to have a central location to find up-to-date information. This would allow staff to get the correct information in an organized fashion. When directives fall through the cracks, if supervisors or management are out of the office, there's still a place to acquire the information. Another suggestion mentioned earlier was to send all emails that go to individuals, families, and providers to the DDS staff. This would help that everyone has the same information and we're all on the same page.
Yep.
There was feedback from some respondents that the Commissioner's Friday emails were minimally helpful. Comments about the timeliness of information, especially surrounding changes in executive management, were identified as opportunities for improvement. The final suggestion was around access to technology. As mentioned in the previous slides, not all staff has access to the same technology. While most respondents have access to state email and a state computer, not all did. Nursing had access to cell phones, while most other respondents didn't. For staff not located in office, this has been identified as a challenge. We identified earlier only 26 of the 153 respondents were in the office full-time. 20 of those were nurses. 7 out of the 10 nurses in the office full-time have a state cell phone. And it's not unusual, as we probably all know, that for case managers and most of the nurses to be teleworking for the majority, as we saw at the beginning. I mean, not teleworking, sorry, in the office. So anyways, next steps. So the goal is to take this to utilize the day and residential ARPA incentives for messaging. So basically take this data that we found and utilize it for how we're going to look at our next meetings going forward. So topics, people that we might want to come and present to us to better understand maybe some of the incentives and how we can better message them to the DDS staff. So I like to think of this as we're doing a teacher's work. We're basically building out a teacher's workbook for students, or not students, but for individuals and families. And uh, so we have to try to gather up as much information as we possibly can to ensure that the DDS staff has some high quality information and 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 understand what options are available because they, generally speaking, have the best some of the best understanding of their, I guess you could say, caseload, and maybe decide that what wasn't good for Kevin, 2 years ago might be good for Kevin now. So I'm gonna stop there, come up for breath. Princess, do you have anything to add to that before I guess we open it up? If any comments, questions for people?
No, I think that no questions or anything, but I definitely wanted to emphasize the fact that there were some good feedback for sure, and I definitely appreciated the more specific examples for things to look out for. And I just agree that this is a good foundation for us to start out with in really trying to structure our meetings going forward, and just trying to keep the focus on making sure that we address some of those issues that the folks who completed the survey had, which is to make sure that the information gets to them timely and all that. So, and I think it's a really good idea to have invite some of the DDS staff to come and present for the incentives, for us to have a better understanding of them also, and to understand, what information needs to go to who, how much information. And that's a very large part of what we are going to be doing too, to make sure that the information gets out there accurately, timely, and all that kind of stuff. So presentation was really well. Julia did a great job with putting that out there.
Yeah, and I already forgot we have to introduce ourselves. I keep forgetting. Kevin Bronson, DDS. I just see Peter Mason on the call and I just always harass him. So I just figured he might be harassing me. But yeah, so I think I think we can take this information, like Princess says, I can share the survey with everyone, or not the survey. I'll share the PowerPoint with the committee members. And if people have, I guess, questions specifically for me right now, I'm happy to answer them. Julia basically wrote the entire thing. I just kind of read what she said and that filled in little pieces, so she gets all of the credit. I want to make sure everyone's aware of that. So I told her she makes me sound smart. So any questions? Any ideas?
Thanks for the presentation. This is Peter Mason. I'll introduce myself, unlike Kevin. I think the presentation went, that's great. I think now what do we do with it? I guess is my question is, what do we do with that?
Kevin Bronson. My initial thought is utilize the information that we got, right? And like I said, data is our yellow golden brick road to find out the incentives that we need to use message and figure out you know, how to best get them to these people with the staff with knowing that, you know, certain things are working and certain things aren't, I guess.
But I mean, I guess this is Peter Mason. It looks like email is still the best format based on this. But it looks like we need to do it in a variety of formats. So whether that's not only sending it as an email, but also making sure the state case manager supervisors have you know, that they are educated on that so that they can present it at their staff meetings. And I think it's interesting about the families and what's being sent out to families. And I think that's maybe something that we need to understand how things get out without being spread out to the case managers and stuff. So.
This is Princess DDS. So what we talked about, the point of the survey was, again, just to get an idea from the DDS staff internally that this is where we're going to be communicating our information from ARPA. Those are our core demographic. So what we wanted to find out from them was really what was lacking in how we communicate. How are they receiving their information? Because we want to make sure that everyone gets the information at the same time as much as possible, because one of the core issues that they had mentioned was that they weren't receiving information timely. And I agree, one of the points that we did pick up from the survey was that they would also like to receive the same information that families and providers are receiving, because it's important for me as a case manager to know what was communicated to them. You know, what do I need to, you know, share additionally, you know, what might benefit one, like Kevin said, in my caseload versus the other. And also another good point that we pulled from that was to have this centralized location for information as well, so that I, as a case manager, can also access this information again when I need it, and not put it in the mental, you know, box of saying, what was that about ARPA that, you know, we learned such and such. And not just that, but when information gets updated, we want to make sure that the information that we're going to be retrieving from that centralized location is current information. If anything's changed with rates, if anything's changed with criteria as far as how people qualify for things, how providers are qualified, you know, what providers are qualified for certain services and these kinds of things, so that we have accessible information, accurate information for us, and it's not, you know, delaying any services and requests and these kinds of things because we don't have accurate information. So not just that, finding out that the way that people prefer to receive the information too is very helpful. So email has been working, and it is working. The people who have cell phones can also access that information on cell phones too and make contact. But I think as far as like for case managers and everyone else, I think email is just the main medium for communication that's been working overall. And again, I was happy to hear that how we are receiving communication right now is working. I think two of the main factors was just timely, receiving it timely, receiving the same information that families and providers are receiving, and also being able to access that information in the future. So those are the three things. So moving forward, as we you know, meet as a committee and we structure our meetings, we can be focused on making sure that we hit those points, those, you know, address those issues. And I'm looking forward to hearing the presentations from the staff that are coming out of the day and the residential committees as well to present to us, so we have a real good idea as to what those incentives are more specifically. So that's something, next thing that I'm actually looking forward to.
Yeah, I have to go, but I think the other piece to this is that we need to make sure that the ARPA website that we have includes all these various pieces, because I know right now we have stuff regarding the committees and we have some of the initiatives, but if we're looking at keeping this up to date, we probably should have what's the transformational process, what's the incentives, so that there's a central piece. So if we can just try to keep that in as part of some of this.
So Kevin Bronson, DDS, Peter, that I think taking off my coacher hat, putting the comms director hat on, is that I think listening to the survey, I think what they're looking for is something, you know, part of our, you know, for the people that aren't with DDS, is we have an intranet, right, where it's basically only DDS staff can get on it. And I think having all of the information there is probably what they're looking for versus our front-facing website where it could get confusing to putting all the information out for, individuals and families and providers. And I think that's the struggle of, trying to focus our work here maybe on more of the intranet and the internal, messaging versus what goes out actually on our website.
Okay, and I think that, we had talked about meeting up with the co-chairs of the individuals and family engagement. I think that conversation between, which is the best way so that we're not duplicating things, but at the same time, we're trying to make sure that people can find the information. So, all right, I gotta go. So thank you.
Thanks, Peter.
Kevin Bronson, DDS, any other committee member that has comments, questions, concerns? Wayne, are you sad that you didn't get counted?
This is Wayne. I'm Wayne Seidel, DDS. I'm okay with that. I do have a few thoughts that I'll share. Great presentation. Julia always does a great job at summarizing the information. A few things that were noteworthy for me. I know we broke out in one of your original charts, we broke out, the different case managers and the different areas that they work. Aggregating all of that, it looked like there were 98 case manager responses, and that's roughly 30% of case management as a whole. Nursing wise, it looked like we had about a 20% participation, and resource management wise, we had about a 19% participation. So I do appreciate the level of participation from each group, and the feedback that was received is certainly very valuable. One point that I would like to think of or just explore a little further, and Princess brought it up as well. It was reflected in the data and the response that came back. Part of the challenge is that, yes, information is in a lot of different places. Like a case manager would have to go to many different places to find something that they were looking for. They remember seeing maybe like 4 weeks ago, like I remember something about that. And now there's a question coming to me and I need to find the answer to that. And so there's multiple places that they're going to look to find it. And that's a little problematic in my mind. Like I would love to come up with a solution and have it not necessarily be multiple places. Now, also the feedback stated that email is a great way to get the information out. But I'm also thinking about some lessons that we learned during the pandemic about the use of our website and how I think, and this wasn't a question for us to ask, but I think we did a good job at communicating the updates. That there were a lot of changes happening regularly and quickly. And we did a good job at, once anything was finalized, getting it up on our website. And I think case managers were leaning on that website as opposed to the intranet. They were leaning a lot on the website to find finalized documents. And that was during a time of a lot of change. But I just would like to see us consider utilizing that tool as well, because as Princess said, then everybody is seeing the same thing at the same time. So that's like one of like 8 thoughts that are running through my head as we're looking at the data that's coming in from this communication survey. How can we ensure that the finalized information, that we're thinking about the presentation and about how we get it out to everybody. And maybe part of that is something that we learned during the pandemic. One of the things that worked really well, getting it up on a centralized and easy place to find on the website, and then sharing that link when using an email distribution. So you're using multiple modes of sharing the information, but they all line up with each other and they're all consistent. So those are, I think, some lessons that I would take away and want to bring forward as a suggestion.
This is Princess. One of the other things too, I wanted to add to that, and I know, Wayne, this is something that, you know, as our Director of Case Management, that you've been really good about doing, but I want to make sure that we keep that up in this communication, both for families and providers and case managers being able to access information. And that's really using live links. So not only should we be able to access the information, but you want to be able to have live active links that you can click on. You know, as a case manager, I want to be able to click on those links and be able to get to the forms, the current forms that I need to do this. And if I'm also trying to assist a provider or answer any questions for families or anything like that, that the links are there for me to access that and be able to send that over right away. So there's some more, you know, complexities, not just getting the information out, but also making sure that everything that we need to get that task done or that action done is also included somewhere within, embedded within that information. Do you understand what I mean? So I think that would be helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Wayne Seidel, DDS speaking. No, I couldn't agree with you more. And I think some of that is in ensuring that all of our staff that are putting some of these communications together, these documents, these memos together, are empowered with the knowledge as to how to get them into a central location and then how to utilize a link as a means of distribution. Because historically, our model of sharing information is to attach a document to an email. And that's why people are searching for emails to find that document. And once that document is outdated and replaced, then that email becomes obsolete. But as noted in the survey, people are still referencing those old obsolete emails. So utilizing a linking feature can ensure that the newest, most up-to-date and relevant information is what people are pointed to. So that's a really important point.
Princess DDS again, and not just that, we would want to communicate that too. As Peter mentioned, we're going to be meeting with the other co-chairs of the other committees too as well, and I think that that's something that would be something to include across the board. You know, I'm sure families would want to be able to, if there's any forms that they need to fill out or they need to access or review or, you know, anything at all, they would want to be able to have access to those forms, you know, right away, and you know, complete them, send them. It'll be helpful for the entire process. So that's something to share and consider. Does anybody else have any other questions, comments about the PowerPoint or anything else?
It was Kevin Bronson, DDS, or even we kind of fell into our next agenda item is you know, it's kind of the future topics where I'm just going to mention this, and still, if anyone has questions, please. But the currently I do not have myself, or Princess does not have in our hand the actual draft incentives yet from the day in residential committees. The goal is to get that information from them, and I will email that around and share it with the group so we can take a look at the incentives that they put together, or at least the draft list of incentives that they put together, and figure out how we can, you know, start messaging, or how we can start looking at, you know, creating these ideas of how to get this information to staff and them actually utilize it properly. And then I think, and then also future topics of, you know, do people want, you know, staff to come subject matter experts? I know the individual and family committee had a couple DDS staff come and review the incentives and what they actually are going to do and mean. I don't know if that's something that this committee would like. Any thoughts, ideas? Nothing? All right, well,
DDS Wayne Seidel here.
yes.
You know, I think it makes sense, right? That's one of our missions here, is to be able to communicate the many things that are going on. And so in trying to consider or think about how best to communicate, we need to know what information we will be communicating. So, I think it makes sense to either ensure that we have an opportunity to review that information, to have people present it to us directly. But I would imagine that is public, that information is public as well and up on our website, or is it the minutes that will be on our website? Like, how does that go? I don't remember. I'm not familiar with who was presenting to who on that.
Yeah, Kevin Bronson, DDS. That's Wayne. That's my. If Peter Mason was still on, he would be the one to answer that. But I don't. That's kind of my problem too. Is I don't know where they are. So, I did try to find them on the website, but I don't think they are. So I'm trying to figure that out myself. On the communication side of making sure that they're on the website for everyone to see, but also as this co-chair to get it for our committee. So, yeah, so I want to get that around. I know that they just were, I believe they just were passed out of their committee, but I'm not sure. So, and then kind of along that same lines is it might be a good idea going forward. Just a thought to meet with to have a joint meeting with the individual and family
Yes.
committee as well. So we're not just siloed like every other state project that happens.
Dawn DiMatteo parent, I'd have to agree with you, Kevin. I think that would be beneficial to all of us.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin Bronson, DDS. Thanks, Dawn. I try to get everyone, as we're doing this, and if there's a parent involved on an internal communications piece, but that's not the same as working together on the larger project as well. So, but Dawn, do you have any from a parent perspective? Is there any issues that you find from, I guess, case management or any staff that you can see?
Yeah, so Dawn DiMatteo parent. I've just, my son's has been a client for numerous years, and what I have found in all the years is a lot of times the case managers are unaware of what's going on. And over the past, I'd have to say 8 to 10 years, I've been really involved in advocating. So I've known some information that I've gotten directly from meetings with maybe legislators or advocating, where we're finding out things that are going on within DDS or that are available within DDS, but our own personal case managers are unaware of it. So I think there's always been an issue with communication, in some case managers knowing a lot of information and some not knowing a lot, which I have to be honest is not fair to families out there. And then families, we do advocate a lot, and you do become, a social network of families, and we'll be talking amongst ourselves, and one family will hear something that is available, which another family hasn't heard. And, information like that is very frustrating as a parent outside of DDS. And it also makes it look like and it's nothing to do with the case managers. They know what they know, and they have information on what they get information on. But then you get to the point where it'll be like, oh, this case manager doesn't really understand what's going on. Well, maybe him or her understand, but don't know about this one other aspect. So I think communication internally, and case managers knowing what's being sent out to parents as well as providers would be extremely helpful.
Kevin Bronson, DDS, thank you for that, and I do wholeheartedly agree. I've found myself that sometimes there's, I liken it to the almost like a teacher's workbook, right? Where I feel like, and I think I've said this multiple times, is I feel like the case manager needs that teacher's workbook where individual and a parent might only need just the student workbook, right? They just need to know about stuff and know that there's options. You know,
Mhm.
the option is there for their, for themselves, for
Yeah.
their individual, their child, but they don't need to know all the ins and outs and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
Because that might
And
be a little
some,
overwhelming, right?
yeah, and it's Dawn DiMatteo, parent again. Just some, an example is one is if there's extra funding in there, say, when there's no day programs or the funding hasn't been passed for day programs in the summer, but there's extra grants or fundings for those families who, had a day program, but now all of a sudden are kind of like in between and the budget hasn't been approved. Some case managers will know about certain grants where others won't. So it's just it's communication, communication, communication.
Yeah.
It's Princess here, DDS. Thanks, Don, for sharing that. It's very, very true, and it's been a lot of the same experience for some. And I just wanted to make sure and emphasize that too. For a lot of case managers, we have mixed caseloads, and so you have some case managers that are mostly private and have like a few families, or and that's part of the problem too. Is that the core amount of your casework, whereas a case might be with a family might be stable and ongoing. There may not be any changes or anything like that. And that's what happens when you receive certain, updates, information, and it goes in the mental box because it doesn't apply to what's happening with individuals in your caseload now. And so sometimes folks are receiving the information and then, not necessarily needing to use the information. Or it doesn't apply to anyone on their caseload just yet. And I think that that's what it is as well. Whereas somebody who has a private caseload, whereas most of their individuals are with providers and there's different types of services, and there's different services that families receive, right? There's different, they can receive grants, whereas a private or individual that's in with a group home and those kind of things, they meet different criteria and only have access to different types of funding. I think that is part of it as well, a large part of it too, but it is not fair to families as well. What you're saying, I totally agree with you. So part of the solution that we're finding, or that we found here too, is to have that really focus on that centralized location to have the information, so that if Johnny is in need of grant money for camp or for anything else that he may need, anything up to date with grants, funding pertaining to that kind of stuff, we would be able to access that in that centralized location. It would be updated information with forms, with criteria, with, everything that we would need. And then, a case manager would be able to investigate and go more specifically pertaining specific to the case, because every case is different, and go from there. So I think this is going to be very, very helpful all around. And not just that, but the families will also have access to that same information in a centralized location where families can receive it, because we're trying to have the same information. So keeping families informed, providers informed, case managers informed with the same information. I think that's part of the goal of the task here.
Hey, so I'll add Marina Derman, parent, also been in the same trenches Don has been in. So I'll echo everything she said. So adding on to that also is that for those families who like to do their own research, notoriously the DDS website is opaque and confusing and hard to navigate. No, that's no news to any of you, I'm sure. So that's not a friendly place to go try to find your own info if you are trying to find it out. And some of the challenges that everyone's talking about here are not super new. So some of my background was in technology consulting once upon a time. And as early as the 90s, there's lots of, moving ahead into having intranets versus extranets and allowing, some pieces of this to be internally workable within communication within your organization, and then allowing other pieces of it to be accessible by outside groups, whether it was your partner organizations or your customers. So that's shouldn't be super hard to organize, because that's been, I think, well tried and well done to have a central repository that's kept updated so people don't run into outdated information, you know, it's pruned, it's updated, it's gotten rid of, so people don't run into old bad forms or old bad information. But Wayne is absolutely correct that people use their email as their filing cabinet, and that's, you know, that's not a good thing. So anyway, one would hope that this is not a hard technological problem. It's just it's just changing some practices as much as anything else, and making a lot of things more user experience friendly.
Yeah, Kevin Bronson, DDS. Yes. So everything everything you said is true. My vision, it's more of the practice, right? It's the practice of, like Wayne said, it's practice of everyone utilizing, attaching emails. You know, you mentioned using Outlook as your filing cabinet, putting everything on your desktop, and you know, whatever, right? It's just that the practice here, you know, we do have an intranet, we do have a lot of these sorts of things, but I don't, in my personal opinion, I don't think they're utilized to the extent that they could and should be, right? To be helpful, especially in a you know, virtual world, shall we say, right? My initial thought is in how intranets are built, right? Intranets are built internally. You know, it's the information should still both be in the same places, but the internal forms that the case manager has to fill out doesn't necessarily have to be, you know, on the website, online, the website, for example. But and it's just getting case managers, getting these staff used to utilizing these things, right? It's just forcing people to slowly get that way. You know, so I'm trying to do that myself with in other sort of things in our agency, but we're slowly getting there.
So it's Marina Derman again. I guess my core question is, to what extent is some of this a technology discussion, which means, do you need a systems integrator to come in and revamp systems to make them work the way you need them to work better? And to what extent is this about policies and practices to make them get used the right way, so everybody has all the information at the right time in the right place?
Kevin Bronson, I would argue it's the latter, the policy and process and that sort of stuff. But I think that's the question of, I mean, that's kind of why we have this committee here, right? Because it's not, that's my opinion, but I'm sure that other people have other ideas, right? So I would open it up to other people, but that's a good question. I don't know. Maybe a great topic, right?
Yeah, Wayne Seidel here. Yeah, Marina, great point, great question, right? Some of that is the work of this committee to figure out and make suggestions, especially in relation to, and I think, and Kevin, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the main task of all of us, and that is to be able to adequately, appropriately, and you know, effectively communicate the ARPA initiatives. One of which is bringing in communications firm or specialists to assist with evaluating and improving our communication. I believe that's one of the ARPA initiatives off the top of my head. So, you know, not so much a systems integrator, but there might be some suggestions that come out of that. There are certainly some other technological items included in that might contribute to communication in the ARPA initiatives, though not directly related to them. So, or charged with them, I should say.
I mean, it's Marina Derman. I think my question would be, systematically, you'd want to rule that out first. Question A would be, do you have all the systems you need to make it work the way you want it to work? Cross that bridge first, because if you don't, then you got to do that. And that's where some of that ARPA money needs to go. And then if you have, then, you know, if otherwise you haven't touched first base. Then if you do have all the systems you need in place, then you can only then can you go to policies and procedures and practices and habits and things like that.
It says Princess DDS. I think that is what we do have going on in place as far as what my understanding is of what Peter Mason communicated initially about this, is that we are looking at hiring communication consultants, and we're also having IT involved also because, you know, in storing information, this is also too something, Kevin, you can probably talk to a little bit as an overhead with communications overall, being our communications director. But that is one of the topics that were already identified on a larger scale for DDS with communication and technology and just kind of how our systems work, because this is something that's been ongoing that we want to address internally. I know that this is something that I've heard discussed, but there is an issue of the technological piece with our current systems that we do have in place. But I feel like the folks don't go to our intranet or intranet because it's not user friendly per se, or because sometimes the information that is there is not necessarily up to date information. And so we find ourselves, like Wayne explained, looking in other places or multiple places to find the same information. So, but to answer your question, that is something, my understanding is that is on the topic, and that is something that DDS is actively engaging in looking at. So Kevin, can you speak to some of that?
Yeah, Kevin Bronson, DDS, and I'll be mindful of people's time. And Marina, we can have this conversation offline too. But basically, this is a bigger issue than just the ARPA initiatives, right? I think we all agree on that, right? Website, everything like that. So the website, the issue with the website is being, just on an aside for people, the issue with the website is we have other focus groups dealing with the website. We're working with IT people to fix the website, to make the website better. All of everyone's issues about the website, right? That's separate and apart from what we're doing here. From what we're doing here is we're kind of, and it kind of plays into a part of, you know, our pitfalls with our messaging and how to fix the system, right? But it's all, and that's something that's not just ARPA. Again, it's a little bigger than that, and this is why it's kind of this is where I get frustrated, right? Is because we're just focusing on ARPA stuff, right? So we're focusing on the initiatives or the incentives that the day and the residential program people that are going to do, and we're going to take that information and or those incentives that they provide and try to figure out how to get that information, tailor it the best way that we can get it to the case manager so they understand, so then they can go back, well, as Princess said, look at their caseload, whether it's variety or, you know, depending on how it looks, and figure out, you know, proactively how they can start reaching out to these families and individuals and say, hey, look, I just learned about this great new stuff, you know. So it's a two-for way of getting this information at the end of the day to the individual and the family member, right? So what I wanted to do with this presentation, and I didn't want to, like, you know, keep belaboring the point, is that we all know that there's communications issues. We're trying to fix the communications issues, but I think that the process of the process that we need to work to fix the stuff is going to be longer than the amount of time that we have to spend the ARPA money, right? We have 20 months to spend this ARPA money, and so we need to focus on getting this ARPA stuff, and that's kind of what we're doing, right? Is that if we don't spend the money, it's gone, and then we don't get to do our stuff. So it's, and this is my personal struggle as a communications director, is that I'm trying to do these fixes that, you know, Marina and Dawn and all you guys are talking about, right? Is all these issues, right? On an aside, but we're right here focusing on, like, this, you know, getting this ARPA money basically spent and getting, you know, more people in a more individualized, customized setting. Wayne.
Wayneside LDDS. So based on what you're saying and based on our agenda, it looks like as in our final minutes here, our goal is to come up with some future topics for our next meeting. And if we think about the things that we learned from our discussion today, as far as the feedback from the survey that came in and how to tie that together with what our goal is here, and the comments, like I'm thinking about Dawn's comment about, hearing things legislatively and hearing about perhaps like a family member hearing about some of these initiatives before our own staff have an opportunity to be aware of them. So our mission is really to get that information out to the staff in a timely fashion, as it's happening. So, I mean, wouldn't that be our future topic, our goal for our next meeting, is to really get down to specifics, using the information some of the information that we gathered from the survey, some specific ideas and steps as to how to ensure that the right information is shared in a timely fashion, and coming up with strategies to be able to do that effectively.
Kevin Bronson, DDS, yes, that works too. And to Marina's point as well, is it's the I think that the certain tech stuff is there. It's like she mentioned, I don't think we need to focus on that. I do think we kind of need to focus on maybe the policies and tie that the policy procedure sort of stuff into, Wayne, what you just mentioned. Anything else from anyone? And feel free, we could always do this over email if people don't have ideas right now. Okay. Sorry,
Yes,
go ahead,
for
Princess.
future topics, yes, definitely. If anybody has anything else to add, but that's definitely one of the core things. I just wanted to make sure that folks are aware that we definitely do have, through our communications division, we are actively working on the website issues and streamlining how our information is stored, and that's happening. That's a good thing. But I agree, our focus definitely needs to be how to get this information out to folks at the same time, because this can't wait for that to happen. So I think strategy is important. One of the other things I think we need to add is also to make sure that we get some experts to come and talk about the topics pertaining to the draft incentives for residential and day, so that way we have some specifics ourselves and in understanding the information, understanding what's out there with the incentives, and kind of help us with our goal and know kind of what we're working with as far as information goes pertaining to those. And then we also, one of the things we'll talk about too is I think co-chairs are supposed to be meeting together also to kind of get some ARPA updates overall in general. So we'll have that to share with the committee next time too as well. So we're looking forward to getting together to hear what everyone else has been doing. Those are the two things that I have noted. So if anybody else has anything else to add concerning future topics, or any other questions pertaining to the draft incentives, if there's anything specific that you had questions about that you would want us to kind of touch on at the next meeting, to let us know.
Thanks, Princess. Kevin Bronson, and then DDS. I'll also add in, we talk with the other co-chairs about doing maybe a joint meeting with the individual and family group, so we can kind of work through some of the stuff together.
That'd be good.
So next one, meeting scheduling committee going forward adjustments. So come to find out, I must have been working off of the wrong calendar. So I think someone mentioned one of the dates and times that I have that were picked out was a Saturday. The goal is not to meet over the weekend. It's still just to meet during the week. So the meeting schedule going forward, we wanted to keep it at 3 weeks. The other committees are meeting every 2 weeks. I don't know, we can have this conversation after a couple meetings, but I think they're looking for this committee to start aligning with the other way, basically aligning with the other committees. So one more meeting a month sort of thing. So rather than every 3 weeks, we're going to go every week and a half or every other week. My thought is maybe shooting out a quick doodle poll just to make sure that Wednesdays at 11 work well for people. It seems like it's okay for the most part for people, but I figured we'll just double check to make sure that's okay with everyone else. And then lastly, the thing I was leaving to the end is Joe. Yeah, Joe's still on. I want to introduce everyone to Joe Carvalho. Joe Carvalho is, for people who don't know, Joe is Commissioner Chef's executive assistant, and he's actually going to be taking over my duties as co-chair with Princess at this committee going forward, just because of I'm going to start, as we kind of figured from this, is I'm going to start working with both committee chairs together rather than just focusing on just staff, the DDS staff. So I'll still be at the meetings, I'll probably still attend, but I'm not going to be running them. So, and Joe, I'll just give you the floor if you want to introduce yourself and say hi to people who may not know you.
Hi, everyone. Joe Carvalho, DDS. Thank you, Kevin. And hi, Princess. Nice to meet you virtually. Excited to be a part of this project as the Commissioner's Executive Secretary. Prior to and during the pandemic, we've definitely seen a change in how we've communicated, and a lot of technology has changed throughout that time. So figuring out how to maximize the technology that we have currently, and then looking at opportunities as we move forward, how to maximize upcoming developments and updates and software upgrades to make sure that we're maximizing and streamlining our communication to make our communication as effective as possible is something I'm very interested in doing. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, and thank you for the time.
Kevin Bronson, DDS. Thank you, Joe. I think I'm gonna. Oh, and I going back to the date and time stuff. I'm gonna make like I said, I'll send out the doodle poll. I'm gonna make adjustments. It's not a Saturday. I'll get that fixed. So the calendar should be good. I feel now with Joe being involved, I'll make sure that or Joe will probably end up doing it. He'll send out a new calendar invite with once we make the adjustments, we're going to send out a new calendar invite, which will end up having a different link, but we'll make all of those changes on the website, a different meeting link than this one that we've just kind of been using. So just be updated with that, but we'll try to get, if you guys have Outlook, we'll try to get a actual like reoccurring calendar invite in your calendar so you don't have to be forced to do something yourself. And I think, and I will have meeting minutes to be voted on next meeting. I just didn't get around to doing them. So I apologize, but I think that's it. If anyone else has any questions, comments, concerns, no. Well, I guess then thank you, everyone. I'll call the meeting to close at 12:06 and have a good rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for spending an extra 6 minutes of your time with us today.
Thank you.
Take care.